Welcome to episode 2 of Sports Talk with the Statsman. We'll begin today's episode with a look at the Willie Nylander contract negotiations that are ongoing with the Maple Leafs. And I'll remind you that last week we talked about the deal that Austin Matthews signed, getting a 4-year extension for $13.25 million with the club. That goes alongside now the existing deal that Mitch Marner has at $10.9 million, which has 2 more years to run. And of course, Captain John Tavares in a similar boat with 2 more years at $11 million. Now, for their part, I'll just talk about their skill sets for a second, and we'll get to Willie's situation right after that. First of all, Austin Matthews has scored more goals in the NHL than any other player since he entered the league. So that's his primary skill. But don't forget, he's also among the league leaders in blocking shots among forwards and takeaways for forwards as well that are being measured on a game-by-game basis around the league. So he scores well offensively and defensively among the league leaders in those categories. As for Mitch Marner, he plays in every situation for the Leafs, on the penalty kill, on the power play, and as well as a regular shift and really driving whatever line he is on as the club's best playmaker. Then you've got Captain John Tavares, who has done nothing but score at a point-per-game basis throughout his whole career and through the first 5 years of his contract with the Maple Leafs, as well as being one of the league's top face-off men and a great leader in my estimation. So you measure the skill sets and the dollar value of these players against Willie Nylander, and you know, Willie's a great player and a great talent coming off the best season of his career last year, but he's a notch below these 3 guys, and I think that's where his contract needs to land. Despite the fact he is coming off that career best season and he's in his last year of his deal, I think taking his age, 27, and the skill set that he has, where he's not used in shorthanded situations and something of a defensive liability in 5-on-5 situations, despite those great offensive skills, I think his contract should come in at about 5 years, between $8.5 and $9 million. I'm going to say we put a pin in that comment, and we'll see how that ends up down the road. Now, up next, I want to talk about the Blue Jays, and they're floundering in the playoff race this year, and it's because of a lack of attention to fundamentals that is just driving fans like me crazy. Consider, in the last few days, we saw a base running gaff by none other than Bo Bichette, who was on second base with nobody out, decides on a ground ball hit in front of him to run toward third base. Well, the third baseman and shortstop see this and play in front of them, and they make sure that he's out at third base. So an easy out in that circumstance, and they take away a runner from scoring position. Look, little leaguers are taught not to run on balls that are hit in front of them. Wait till the ball clears through the infield before you decide to get to that next base. And this is just a fundamental, and it's a brain fart. And we saw a couple others on the weekend that also mitigated the circumstances toward winning possibilities for the Blue Jays. Consider, they were in an extra inning game on the weekend. Brandon Belt can't advance a runner on second base with nobody out. Instead, he strikes out. And he's done a lot of that striking out this year. This is a 13-year veteran, folks, who is noted for a great on-base percentage and a good clubhouse guy and all the rest of it. But in that circumstance, he has to move the runner along. And he hasn't done that very well this season. He struck out at about a .333 clip. That's once every 3 at-bats. Very high, the highest in his career, in fact. Then you pair that with what Kevin Biggio did, facing the same situation in the next inning. Runner on second base, nobody out. He decides to bunt. Now, we can argue that a bunt is not a great play, not a bad play either, depending on how it turns out. With nobody out and a runner on second, you can get the runner to third with one out. That's not a bad circumstance. So I'll take that if you can advance to 90 feet. And you got 2 more cracks to bring the guy in. But Biggio's bunt attempt is what bothered me. Instead of putting the ball down the third base line so the third baseman has to field it, what does he do? He puts it toward the first baseman, who is charging toward him, and his momentum is taking him toward third base. He's an easy out, the base runner is, because of that bad bunt. Again, an attention to fundamental baseball was lacking there, and it cost the Jays dearly. Finally, in the final inning of that third game in this series, Santiago Espinal, a light-hitting guy, works a 3-0 count. The club's down 3 runs, okay? So they need base runners. What does this guy decide to do? He thinks he's going to try and swing away, and he turns what could have been a ball 4 situation, another base runner, into another out on the bases that was critical to the Jays and led eventually to them sealing the deal on a series loss against a bad Cleveland club. Look, the 2023 Blue Jays are not making the playoffs based on what I've seen in the last couple of weeks. Instead of being sharp, they're not. They're clearly more of an emphasis on fundamentals is needed, and that's really something they got to work on hard in the offseason in preparation for next year, because I think this one's lost. I expect plenty of offseason changes on and off the field, and we'll be talking about that in the weeks to come for sure. You want to know about a team that will make the playoffs and is playing smart? I bring you the Toronto Argonauts. They're the top team in the Canadian Football League at the halfway mark of the season with an 8-1 record, and they're playing some very entertaining football, folks. Sadly, it's in front of a lot of empty seats, and that's very disappointing to see as a Toronto sports fan. Look at rookie quarterback Chad Kelly. He's tearing this league apart right now, reminding people that he is the nephew of Jim Kelly, the NFL great, who is in the Hall of Fame there, and his nephew is throwing the ball all over the yard at BMO Field. And he's got the likes of Andrew Harris and A.J. Ouellette backing him up in a two-pronged attack from the running back position, a fleet set of wide receivers, an attack-minded defense that is all over the quarterbacks of the opposing teams, and very talented special teams that has run back 4 punts for touchdowns this season. This is the best Argo team I've seen in 20 years, and they're already coming into the season as defending champs, so there's plenty of good things going on there. They deserve more support than they're getting. And I urge you to get down to BMO Field and check them out. Finally, on a bit of a sad note for me, Bobby Baun passed away a little over a week ago, and he was one of my favorites on the Maple Leaf squad of the 60s and 70s. Won 4 cups with the Leafs in the 1960s and had a reputation as a big-time hitter, folks, and that's something you don't see in hockey these days. The big open ice hit that he was famous for, he even labeled Bobby Orr a couple of times, injuring him once with a very clean hit. And making a reputation for himself that was well earned. He, in fact, also added to that rep by scoring a playoff game-winning goal in a 1964 playoff game in overtime, a game where he suffered a leg injury and was stretchered off the ice earlier in play, but decided to come back and settle the outcome in a game that goes down in the annals of Leaf lore. These are all instances that make me so glad I'm a sports fan, whether it's good or bad, and I hope you're getting a little bit of fun taking in these accounts that I bring you on every few days on this platform. If you like what you've heard, please hit the subscribe button on the screen below. It's free. I thank you for listening, and I'll be back soon with more observations.